This is an emergency update. I apologize in advance for the subpar audio quality. I don't have my microphone today. It's not going to matter in a minute anyways. U.S. Northern Command has raised security across all military installations in the continental U.S. and Alaska. No specific threats have been reported, but measures will remain as long as necessary as per U.S. NORTHCOM. I repeat, U.S. Northern Command has raised security across all military installations in the continental U.S. and Alaska with no specific threats reported. Now, we might be tempted to relegate this to the protests that are supposed to be unfolding in major urban centers across America today. They, of course, in some of those cities have a corresponding police, military, and National Guard presence. However, there are other events that are developing around the world that this could relate to. According to CNN, U.S. intelligence authorities believe it's possible that Iran could launch cyber attacks targeting U.S. critical infrastructure in response to the attempts at regime change that are ongoing there. Now, of course, we must cite that source being CNN and U.S. intelligence, who are known for their skullduggery. So we must presume that there perhaps is a subtext or a double meaning to these messages. I presume that what they're trying to say is that indeed there could be a legitimate cyber attack. There are zero-day exploits that exist on our software and our computing systems throughout North America that could be exploited by our adversaries in the run-up to a full-blown strategic war between superpowers. However, this also could be priming for a major false flag attack in order to be used as justification to go into war with Iran. It's also important to note that the U.S. Air Force's HFGCS broadcasted a massive 246-character emergency action message today. This is an unusually long EAM. EAMs are coded messages used to transmit critical orders often related to nuclear or strategic operations to military units worldwide via high-frequency radio. And the recording of a transmission, which was 20 minutes to broadcast, is quite unusual. Now, could this be related to NORTHCOM, which could be related to the protest? It's very possible. It's also worth noting, however, that of course they are going for regime change in Iran, and don't be fooled by any brief reprieve or just because you don't see missiles raining down on Tel Aviv on a constant basis. Right now, they're preparing some major operations. The Middle East is about to be turned upside down, and Trump is going to go all in with Netanyahu. We've been talking with guests on this channel. I've been talking about it for 18 months, about the inevitability of the war with Iran, long before it was on most commentators' radar. And the Path to Persia paper, the policy paper written by the Brookings Institute, outlined in clear detail exactly the game plan that they're executing right now. They are going for total and complete regime change. Whether it results in a civil war or nuclear detonations, they don't care. And right now, Israel is in the process of targeting oil and gas infrastructure in Iran, which Iran has established as a red line. Of course, there are many red lines. I would suspect that for any self-respecting government, taking out the entire upper echelon of your military would be considered a red line. But I also understand that Iran is ultimately the underdog in a war, a full-blown war with Israel and the United States, and they don't openly disclose that they have nuclear weapons, so they have to play this carefully. They are allegedly amassing a 2,000-strong ballistic missile barrage that is going to be launched at Israel, and I presume that's going to be accompanied by hundreds, if not thousands, of the Shahed drones to occupy. It's not so much that the United States and Israel lack the firepower, per se, the offensive firepower, but they do lack the defensive capability to protect Israel. And what we've seen with that ballistic missile landing dead center on headquarters, or whatever it hit, the Israeli command headquarters inside Tel Aviv, which they conveniently pepper their surface-to-air missiles and their command and control center throughout the city of Tel Aviv. They do that for a reason, guys. You realize that, right? Because then it makes for a lot of good pearl clutching afterwards. But we seen that they were able to hit that, okay? And so if they were able to hit it with a conventional warhead, that means they're able to hit it with a nuclear one. So that was a warning. Now, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had a phone call this morning, right? It was an hour-long phone call. People think it's because Putin was trying to wish Trump happy birthday. Maybe it was Putin trying to whisper sweet nothings in Trump's ear, or maybe this was a final touching base before Day X kicks off. Because what we've seen orchestrated against Russian nuclear bases, and this is something that must remain fresh in people's minds. We must understand that this was coordinated at a high level. The attacks on Russian nuclear bases, utilizing the exact same tactics that were executed on the Iranian air defense systems and the assassinations of their top brass. These were very similar. They followed the same blueprint. They were executed relatively close to each other. I presume that the Russian operation was a trial run for the Iranian operation, and we can presume that these are only going to continue. And in effect, this most recent operation against the Iranian nuclear facilities was a veiled threat towards Russia. And there is a policy paper on that as well, about how to do a decapitation strike inside Russia, leveraging no nuclear weapons, okay? And that's the thing that people need to understand. They now believe that they can do decapitations on these major powers without having to use nuclear weapons. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that's great, right? Because that means there's going to be no nuclear war. But I would remind you of something called the dead hand system. If Vladimir Putin or the top leadership of the Russian government is taken out, dead hand will become active. This is made so that should the government fall, they're going to launch everything at the same time. And I'm sure this system has been tweaked over the years. And right now, if Iran cannot hold it together and Russia's southern flank is compromised, that's going to put Russia in a very tight spot. So make no mistake, this phone call with respect to Vladimir Putin to Donald Trump, it had nothing to do or very little to do with wishing Trump happy birthday. I presume they were speaking in tongues throughout this entire phone call, issuing veiled threats to one another. That if you overstep your boundaries in Iran, we're going to have to make a move, and vice versa. So this is why we have NORTHCOM on high alert. This is why you have these No Kings protests conveniently scheduled ahead of the Iranian attack that has been planned for months, right? So Israel knew that these protests were going to be ongoing right when this war was starting to ramp up. How convenient is that? And then you also have the added benefit of getting the military in the streets in order to administrate any sort of civil defense that might be required should we enter a full-blown SHTF situation. How convenient is that? And of course, you know that piggybacking on these protests are going to be anti-war protests. So, and that's going to be likely it's going to be bipartisan in nature, because there's a lot of people in MAGA who don't want a war and they don't want to go and fight a war for Israel. All right. So people need to get ready and take this opportunity right now. Just do me this one favor. Go and get yourself squared away. Make sure you have a little bit of cash. If the power goes out, make sure you're filling up that bathtub with water. Once that water pressure drops, you're not going to be able to get water. You're going to have to go out into what could very well be a war zone to get water. And I'm talking about anarchy. I'm talking about looting. You need to get your food squared away. You need to get everything prepared. They're sending you all the signals right now. NORTHCOM, STRATCOM, emergency action messages, a new war starting, U.S. intelligence warning about cyber attacks that are about to take place, and they're going to blame them on Iran. Now is the time to prepare. Go and watch the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel and just get yourself educated and squared away while you still can, because time really is running out. Thanks for watching.